Happy Saturday, everybody. Happy Saturday. If you're on here, hit that like button. Tag anybody, share this with someone that you think may find it interesting. This should be a fun one. So I asked a question earlier whether or not therapists are the enemies of Black men. By now, you guys may or may not have seen a few videos actually that went viral of a Black or a Black therapist. Actually, both of them are female, but essentially Black therapists who have gone online and said arguably misandrous things as it relates to men and Black men in particular. So I've noticed this trend of, more women going viral for saying things that could be considered misandrous or saying things that could be considered, quite frankly, disrespectful to men. And it's all been in an effort to try to encourage men to get into therapy, to try to encourage men to be more emotionally open. But in it, we can see all kind of gaslighting or just all kinds of things that can come off as questionable. So I'm excited to talk about this because I think this is a must-needed conversation. I certainly believe that therapy is incredibly helpful for everybody, man, woman included. But we have to be honest about the fact that not all therapists are created equal, and not everyone is the best fit. So without further ado, I want to actually bring on a Black male therapist to kind of weigh in on some of the different viral videos as it relates to Black men and just their entire experience with mental health in general. So this should be fun. Again, guys, if you're here, hit that like button. Also, if you would like to show support to the show, you can find me on Cash App or Shade. And as always, I'll be sure to acknowledge super chat. So without further ado, I will bring on this special guest and we'll get right into the topic.
Shay, how are you, dear? What's going on?
Hey.
Doing great. How are you, dear? What's going on? All right.
Pretty good. So thanks for joining me. This should be interesting.
Yes.
So, I mentioned before, over the last maybe month or two, there's been at least two separate times where I've seen two different Black female therapists who have gone viral. They've basically explained their understanding of Black men. From my vantage point, if I'm being honest, I've sensed a bit of misandry in both of them, but nevertheless, they went viral. And these are well-educated African-American women who have a practice that is,
right,
specifically for mental health. So without me putting my 2 cents on it, I thought it would be better to actually weigh in with somebody who this is their profession and get their perspective on just this whole industry in general and how Black men can navigate, and quite frankly, maybe some of the challenges that they may encounter and how to navigate them. So I'm going to bring up the video that went viral a couple of days ago. There's about 3 I want to go through because she went viral for saying something and then she got some pushback and then she said an apology. Right. And then something just posted, I think, later on today of her mentioning that she got fired and she has a story to tell. I haven't seen the last one, but I think nevertheless to be able to impact something.
Yeah, I would love to see those links. I would definitely love to see them.
Yeah. So, okay. So let me, I'm going to pull up the first one and we'll get into it. Okay. Okay, where to go? Oops. Sorry, there's like 3 different videos, so I'm trying to find the right one. Okay, so this is the one viral a few days back where she's basically just calling herself, trying to basically, I think, encourage or get Black men to weigh in. And she's explaining why she believes Black men just need to man up and get therapy. So I'm going to play it, and then we can maybe unpack it for a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Say you need to expand your emotional vocabulary. It's so your life can be easier. Don't you want to be able to communicate with your bitch? I think yes, right? Long gone are the days where you can just shut down. Bitches is not tolerating that. Like, it used to be where men provided financially or with Schmeat, and bitches can make their own self come and we can pay for our own shit. So I'm gonna need y'all to catch up on the emotional part. If a bitch is telling you, I need you to communicate more, open your fucking mouth. But you know what I realized? And let me back up. A common conception about me as a clinician is that 90% of my clientele have been men, black men specifically. And what we specifically work on is expanding their emotional vocabulary, because a lot of y'all motherfuckers don't even have the words to express how you're feeling. So when you expand your vocabulary and knowledge of what you are experiencing, because y'all are human beings who experience feelings and emotions, and don't have to choke that shit down no more. Y'all ain't had to choke that shit down since 2016. Anyway, if y'all are not in therapy, expanding your emotional vocabulary, your life just off top is going to be more difficult.
It's an echo from
when you expand your emotional vocabulary, you expand your awareness of yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Yeah, it was a lot of echo. I don't know where it was coming from.
Oh, really? Really? Oh, you know what? Okay, let me do this. This is always okay. Let me do this. 1 second. I'm gonna play this again and let me know if you.
Yeah. Play about midway. I basically heard the gist of what she's saying, but let's play it midway, Shade, to get a greater grasp.
Provided financially or with Schmeat, and bitches can make their own self come, and we can pay for our own shit. So I'm gonna need y'all to catch up on the emotional part. If a bitch is telling you, I need you to communicate more, open your fucking mouth. But you know what I realized? And let me back up. A common misconception about me as a clinician is that 90% of my clientele have been men, black men specifically. And what we specifically work on is expanding their emotional vocabulary, because a lot of y'all motherfuckers don't even have the words to express how you're feeling. So when you expand your vocabulary and knowledge of what you are experiencing, because y'all are human beings who experience feelings and emotions and don't have to choke that shit down no more. Y'all ain't had to choke that shit down since 2016. Anyway, if y'all are not in therapy, expanding your emotional vocabulary, your life just off top is going to be more difficult. When you expand your emotional vocabulary, you expand your awareness of yourself. When you expand your emotional vocabulary, you understand how you can navigate in this bitch. This fucking weird ass world that is so hard on y'all. Like, let's acknowledge the world is very difficult, but y'all are not making it any easier, bro. You're not. When bitches are telling y'all to go to therapy, it's not for us. It's for y'all sad motherfuckers. Go to therapy. Talk about that shit that's on your chest. You don't have to choke that shit down no more. Y'all are doing a disservice to yourself. And so let me sum this shit up. Y'all told bitches to elevate our standards. And at the cost of us elevating y'all standards, y'all got axed because y'all didn't elevate either. Bitches are not tolerating emotional abuse, emotional neglect. Step it up. Go talk to somebody. Go expand your emotional vocabulary so your life can be better, bitch. All right. Go in peace.
Oh my goodness.
Say you need to expand your emotional vocabulary. It's so your.
Okay, so you were able to hear it better that second time?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I did. I did.
So there is a lot to unpack there. I don't even know where you want to begin. I don't know if you just kind of want to win on the whole thing or go back and kind of dissect certain pieces. But I mean, what are your initial thoughts after hearing her cry out to black men?
Well, to me as a therapist, we all should strive, Shay, to leave our own biases behind. And while it is important to open up with therapy, but there's a time variation or a time variant, but also there's a cultural connotation as well. What this woman did, she made a presupposition, even though she was talking specifically to black men. Her lack of understanding that all black men are not the same from different demographics in the United States. But also when we talk about the encompassing of black men, we also can talk about men from the African diaspora. So she comes off as being not showing empathy. You know, as a therapist, we talk about the right to self-determination. And when men begin to open up, sometimes men can't open up because of trauma. Now, there's a concept, Shay, called transference in the clinical world. And you know, sometimes the women that are exuding or asking those men to open up, those women could resemble their girlfriends or their mothers. And so a man cannot be readily always apt to open up as quick as a woman should expect, because what she's doing, she's making the therapeutic process about herself instead of making it about the client. There's a time variation that all therapists go through, Shay, called a therapeutic alliance. but also there's a presupposition called congruence in therapy. And so, you have to be congruent and you have to make sure it's a good fit. But she comes off as being very, in my opinion, lacking empathy. She comes, and maybe it was just a skit, but comes off very unprofessional. For to be a licensed professional, you are off with these diatribes, and what's happening there, Shay. So many men are saying that many professional women lack some of the what we call je ne sais quoi of professionalism. They say you really can't tell the difference between a professional woman and a 304. And so I don't think she more or less exhibits those qualities of a seasoned professional. She might be a therapist on writing and on paper, but she doesn't like the social skills or the cerebralness or the self-awareness to understand that there's a time variation with all therapists, with all clients, and that she must be sensitive to understanding the needs of men in order to help those men become the better version of themselves. I took some notes, Shay, while you were talking, and imagine if a man said that a male therapist said, almost like a male therapist berating a woman and saying, you need to be out of your feelings and be more logical. How would that sound?
Yeah, that would sound
right.
That wouldn't sound good.
That wouldn't sound good.
You're trying to make me be like a man.
Right.
Which when I heard her, that one of the first thing that I noticed was like, this whole idea, and I'd be curious to get your thought on this whole idea of emotional intelligence. I hear that a lot, and I think what happens is that a lot of women unknowingly judge men based upon the way that they experience and express emotions. And I think there has to be a clear understanding of like men and women experience and express emotions differently. It doesn't make one or more or less intelligent, but there has to be room for those unique expressions. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Men, listen, there is definitely a time when men should open up and express themselves. But once again, you're right. We all express ourselves from different perspectives. Many times, as I said earlier, from a demographic perspective, how somebody in the South expressed themselves might be totally different than how someone in the Northeast expressed themselves versus somebody in the West Coast, but also versus someone from the African diaspora. That's why I say it's an ethnocentric approach. And I think we got to be more sensitive to understanding how those variances play a role in how men correlate how they feel. And so, it just came off very callous to some degree. Therapy is needed, therapy is wanted, therapy is necessary. But everybody does not always mesh with a particular population just because they are therapists. That's why you have to feel people out. You have to more or less understand their worldview and then ask yourself the question, is it a good fit when you're trying to coalesce the two worldviews? If it's not, then it's best to refer that person out. But what it is also, Shay, I think we always try to tell men what their stories are instead of hearing our stories. I'm gonna say it again, Shay. We try to tell men what our stories are instead of hearing our stories. Almost like when it comes down to accountability and responsibility and also trauma. Many times, Shay, we always say when it comes down to men issues or male rights, we minimize the importance of men and masculinity. But on the flip side, when she's going through the same thing, we tend to aggrandize or magnify what she's going through without understanding how that man feels. And it happens all too often, the minimization of masculinity, the magnification of the master feminine. And what it does, it causes men to be in a state of karma where they feel like they got to continue to refine themselves in order to be accepted in a society where men many times are not warranted as it relates to being honored and respected.
Very, 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 very interesting. So then this goes back to because if men exist in a space, right, where they basically feel like they're in enemy territory, they feel like they can't be themselves without being judged or berated or shamed, then who wants to be emotionally open in that scenario? Who wants to share the deeper, sensitive parts of themselves? Like that would be opening yourself up for more harm. So, I wonder, because this is something that I've heard a lot, different complaints I've heard from women in general of just like, oh, I want a man who's emotionally available or I want a man who's emotionally intelligent. These things that are thrown around constantly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're basically saying that because in this cultural context, maleness or masculinity is not necessarily respected as something unique and different from femininity, but men are oftentimes perceived through the lens of femininity, that it creates a space for them to be a huge disconnect and quite frankly disrespect.
Right. It's almost like it's like it's in the clinical world, Shay, we call it contraindicated. It's almost like we try to shape men within the worldview of the grand feminine instead of letting the masculine be what it is. Men years ago, Shay, were very stoic. We were very stoic in our affect. Affect is what you see. The mood is what the client tell you what they're dealing with. But men were very stoic in their affect for a myriad of reasons, because as we were beginning to become burgeoning, as we begin to expand on the greater kaleidoscope called the United States, men didn't have time to be in their feelings. They had to fight through the power of adversity of Jim Crow racism. We had to fight through our issues. Now, there is a clear balance, and there are times you need to express yourself. I'm not against that. But men cannot always revel in their feelings, because the masculine is doing, the feminine is being. So if the man is constantly being, then how can he be doing? So men don't have time to revel in emotions. I'm not saying a man cannot emit emotions. I'm not saying that men should not share or more or less share their emotional feelings. If you look at Christ as he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ wept. He wept for because the humanity of Christ didn't want to bear the cross. But when he understood that his purpose superseded his fickle feelings, he said, not my will, but thy will be done. And so that's what men are saying. When you have a purpose outside of your feelings, then you'll supersede those said feelings. It's nothing wrong with men having feelings. There's nothing wrong with that. But she can't dictate to a man how he needs to express himself, because when men start beating their feelings too much, then that same woman that said you need to be more expressive, she'll say you're crying too much. So the man can't win for losing. So men have to set the template and the bar for what they deem to be important as men, and just let the man be who he is. Because see, if a woman is truly feminine shape, eventually the man will open up to her, but it's on his own timing, not hers.
Very, very interesting. So you were saying, going back to at the very least the history of what's happened in America, especially as it pertains to Black men.
Right.
Stoicism, to a certain extent, it was probably needed as a mechanism for survival, as you're navigating through the different hardships of again, Jim Crow, different discrimination, trying to figure out how to survive essentially. And those hardships, in order to be progressive, in order to be productive, in that you don't have time or quite frankly the luxury to kind of like sit in your feelings, because you're so busy trying to produce and make things happen and create a safe space for you and your family. And so that produced a generation of, as you put it, stoic men. So then would you say, because I hear this argument a lot of like nurture versus nature, where it's like, okay, are men tend to naturally be more stoic or more logical, or is it because there are the pressures of society that kind of force them to only operate within a certain context, and we need to create an environment where they're free to be more emotionally open, or is it a mixture of both?
I think it's a mixture. I think it's a mixture of both, Shay. I think men are. Give me an example. You did an excellent expose about nature versus nurture. Nurture is actually the socialization. Nature is the intrinsicity of what a man is. We are intrinsically men. But that intrinsicity can be more or less, how can I say it, manipulated based on the constraints of society. But however, there's a such thing called biological determinism that plays a role in how people actually perform and actually see themselves. Temperament plays a role as well, in my opinion. It's almost like, Shay, you can take a lion and you put that lion in a cage, and you can control that lion for a period of time. But that lion, once he gets back in the wilderness, is still a lion. He's still a lion in his core. And the proper trigger will bring out the lion in that lion. So can we argue that sometimes men were too stoic of the past? Yes, they were too stoic, but many of those men were dealing with trauma. And so the way they dealt with their trauma was by being indifferent. They were just indifferent, maybe sometimes very apathetic as well. But there's a fine line between the two, because what we're seeing now, we're seeing men that are masculine at their core, but they're with what I call very violent women, to the point they can be masculine with men, but they're very feminine when it comes down to their woman, meaning they let their woman dictate to them how to be a man. They'll say, happy wife, happy life. I got to do what my wife say, goofy stuff like that. But when it comes down to other men, they'll jawjack another man. So it's definitely a fine line between the balance of both. But the environment plays a role in how that interplay works shape, and then also temperament, and also some will even say religious expectations as well.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Guys, if you're on here, hit that like button. Show support to the show. I'm having a great interview with Kosher Connection, and we are going over some of the viral videos that have happened recently as it relates to therapists, Black female therapists, and their take on Black men. So I'm so happy to have the special guest. Be sure to check out his channel. And I do want to give a special shout out to Game Dreamer 58 for the 10 on this super sticker. I appreciate you. Okay, so you hit on some really great points. Did you have anything else that you wanted to just weigh in on in regards to that video, or any other things you wanted to call out, or do you want to?
Yeah. Well, you know, she's young. You know, like you said, she lacks. How can I say it? She lacks, and maybe she was goofing off, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But she definitely lacks. She lacks soft skills, and her professional decorum leaves a lot to be desired. But she came off once again berating, or more or less trying to dictate to men how they should respond. And some could argue she was just goofing around playing, but now her energy didn't come off as being wholesome, and definitely doesn't merit what men are looking for as it relates to being around feminine women, in my opinion.
No, totally. And I mean, some of that, as you mentioned, could just be, you think, experience. Like, I definitely got the sense that she seems very young.
She's young, right. She's young,
right. Yeah,
right.
And very new. And that's, I mean, that could be sometimes the downside of social media. Now, your immaturity, your issues, all that stuff is on frontline if you make it be on frontline. So she could look back 10, 15, 20 years from now and be like, that was the worst decision I ever made. But there's more. There is more. So I'm gonna bring up the next video.
Okay.
And then we can get into it, because like I said, she did get some pushback. Surprise. And she have an apology. So I'll be curious to get your take on her apology. So bring that up. And stop this. Okay. So she's on TikTok. I saw this on Dr. T is on though, so I'm just gonna play it from his just to make it easier.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. Let me know if you have any issues with the audio, but I'm gonna turn it off, and then you should be able to.
Society is already very difficult for Black people in general. And for people to call into question saying that I hate Black men is asinine to me, because Black everything matters. Black everything matters. When they see you walking down the street, they don't see a human being. They see what's been perpetuated in society. They see what's been perpetuated in the media, that you're aggressive, that you're violent. But I know that these behaviors that are being exhibited, actually depression and anxiety. And unfortunately, society has taught you that anger and lashing out and fighting back is the only acceptable response. I am pleading that y'all seek help, because women are hurting. We want you to be better. but I'm getting attacked. People are calling my employment, asking that I get fired because I want you guys to be better. Again, like I said, I apologize for my delivery. This is a little spicy sometimes. But just know that my anger and my frustration and my passion is coming from a place of needing. I need y'all to heal. I don't need it. Society needs it. You need it. Have enough pride about yourself to want to do better. I understand I might not be the clinician for everyone, but I'm damn good at my job. I understand I might not be the clinician for anybody, but I've sparked a conversation. I've shook the table. If the words that I'm saying are resonating with you, please go talk to somebody. If there's a gap, fill that gap. Become counselors, become mental health professionals, so we can heal each other, so we can heal ourselves. All that I ask is for men, Black men specifically, just to build a greater awareness of yourselves. That's all that I ask, because your lives can improve radically as a result. Full transparency, accountability moment. I was dusty bitch till I fucking went to therapy. I didn't realize that I was in an abusive situation. I didn't realize that I wasn't communicating effectively. I didn't realize all of these things about myself until I went and talked to someone. And I just pray and want that for you. I want you guys to feel seen. I want you guys to feel heard, because you deserve it. All of us deserve unconditional positive regard. And I may not have shown that in the video because it's the internet, but when it comes to session, I am open. I provide a therapeutic, non-judgmental space, because that's what the fuck we deserve. Because the society is not kind to us. It never has been. So we have to create that inner peace. And in order for you to do that, you have to be able to express things that you have been through. You have to expand your emotional vocabulary. You have to want it for you. You may not like what I say, and you may not even like me, and that's fine, because you don't know me on a personal level. I get that. But I just want you guys to know that I'm not going to stop talking about these issues. I'm not going to stop talking about healing. I'm not going to stop talking about the betterment of Black people, because it's me. I am a Black person who endures the struggles and the tribulations that Black people endure. I know what it feels like to be marginalized. I know what it feels like to be counted out. I know what that feels like. So I apologize if anybody felt that I was coming at them or felt shame and anger. Those aren't good emotions to feel, and I completely empathize with that. But my message is clear. Please go help yourself. And it would be nice for my personal life to be left out of it. Because at the end of the day, I just want everyone to live safe and prosperous and healthy lives. And you don't have to endure all this shit alone.
Okay. So, a lot to unpack there, but tell me just your initial thoughts after hearing her apology. Did that sound like an apology to you?
Well, that's good. Well, listen, and I used to work in law enforcement one time, Shay, and we always posed the question, what was the intent? You can't determine criminality unless you know the intent. I don't know where their intentions are. I will say this. I think she's definitely rough around the edges. She's young. But my first impression of her was that she is, you know, a neophyte to say the least. But is she contrite? Is she showing contrition because she was forced to do it, or is she doing it because she realized that what she was doing is wrong? I don't know. It's probably a combination of both. But you know, many women use crying and gaslighting as a form of manipulation to confound men and to get men off their square. And so I would deal with her with a level of caution because I don't know what her true intent is. Was she crying and did it look like she was contrite? Perhaps. But once again, it's hard to make a true analysis of this woman because I don't know her intentions and I don't have enough context or pre-context to get a clear evaluation. But just on surface, she looks like perhaps maybe she was showing a level of contrition. But then again, it could be because she was forced to do it because of you know, the backlash that she got. Because like you said something earlier about emotional IQ and soft skills. She didn't exhibit any of that. And the fact she said she was going through some issues herself, you would think that maybe she need to, you know, make sure she unpack a lot of her issues before she verbally berate black men.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I mean, the therapist I've been seeing for a few months now, she's amazing. But she's been doing therapy, I think, doing it for like 30 or 40 years.
Right.
Seasoned in her field, but she told me that early on, what's supposed to happen is you go through, you know, your training, and then you yourself go into therapy and essentially walk yourself through the very program or through the processes that you would, in theory, take clients through. And she said for her, that took her a good 6-7 years, you know, to really, really unpack and start to address some of those deeper ills. And you know, as her client, it's like, okay, I'm so grateful. Like I see how amazing she is, but I can imagine, you know, being in that position when you're so green, and if you haven't dealt with your own trauma, or if you still have a faulty lens, for lack of a better term, how you can see everything through that faulty lens. So what stood out to me was the I'm sorry, but I'm not really sorry. Kind of like, I'm sorry I made y'all offended because I know my approach can suck, but what I said still stands true. And you know, and that begs the question. It's like, was the intent of her overall message, was that in and of itself valid and true, or could it be perceived as misandrous?
Yeah. Perception is everything. It could have been perceived as being misandrous. I totally agree with you. But you know, that's for interpretation. But perception for many people is a reality. And then, you know, based on the first impression that I saw of this woman, it would more or less propose that she does have some misandric undertones. But once again, not having the full kaleidoscope of her experience, who she is as an individual, it's hard to tell 100%. But there is a percentage based on her tone and her lack of awareness that there could be some misandric undertones. Because see, most schools now are bastions of liberalism. Many therapists, especially women and some men, are trained under what's called the feminist theory lens. And
No, I was going to say, that was actually going to be something I wanted to ask you. If therapists are trained under feminist thought, like if they look, if there's a huge emphasis on female psychology, or do you look at both female and male psychology in a different lens? I was curious. I wanted to ask you about that. So.
Yeah. So feminist theory lens mostly looks at human beings. They say they look at men and women under a lens of oppression, and how oppression has played a role in their greater experience as human beings. But the feminist theory lens often talks about discrimination, objectification, oppression, patriarchy, stereotyping, art history, or whatever. So it tends to look at their experiences through the canopy of patriarchy. And see, here's a problem with that, Shay. I had a conversation with somebody today, and you know, my argument is that America, when it relates to black men in power, was never a true patriarchy. It was it was a quasi shape, or it has some patriarchal elements, but it was not a bona fide patriarchy. And I'm gonna explain why. A bona fide patriarchy, Shay, in my great best estimation, is predicated on three concepts in the clinical world. At the macro level, men make all the rules. Black men never had the power to make rules at the macro level as a whole. We were a minority under a minority of men that were often white men. And so even then we were often ostracized. We never had exclusive power to make laws and rules and dictates. If you don't believe me, ask Barack Obama when he ran for president. All the presidents up to this point were not black men, they were white men. So you can't say we are patriarchy when only a few rule. A true patriarchy, in my opinion, or what I call a kosher patriarchy, Shay, is a patriarchy where it's exclusive. It's not exclusive to white men, but it's inclusive to all men. Now watch this. The next one, Shay, is called the meso level. The meso level is the community or the group dynamic. Black men never had power 100% unequivocal at the group level. We did have it in part, but we never had it in whole. We had it more in part years ago as fathers were the head of their communities, but we never had it in whole because even back then, Shay, many of the community dynamics were more or less controlled or corralled by Jim Crow racism. And then the last one, Shay, would be at the micro level, which is the family dynamic or the individualized or family dynamic. There was a time black men had more control over their family, but they were still constrained many times, by liberal dogma. Or if the woman said, well, he hit me or he did X, Y, Z, she called the man. Sometimes white people were maybe not as receptive to coming to the aid of domestic issues with black men and black women. But now some will argue that a percentage of our women are agent provocateurs because they play a role in the oppression and the misandry of black men. They play a role when it comes down also to policy making. This last election, Shay, you saw it manifest full hand, where they didn't vote for the community, but they voted for themselves. Many were saying chucks and pearls. They were saying chucks and pearls. They weren't talking about chucks and pearls as it related to black boys, black girls, and the black community as a collective. But Shay, when it comes down to servitude, then you said black men should be leaders in that community as it relates to them. So a lot of our women have a very, what I call dichotomous thinking. And it's not all, shout out to the good sisters, but many have dichotomous thinking. When it comes down to power, it's about individualism. When it comes down to servitude, it's about the group collective. So when people say, we're a true patriarchy, we were never a true patriarchy because a true patriarchy is kosher, no pun intended, at the macro level, meso level, and also at the micro level.
No, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And I know Dr. Tommy Curry kind of breaks this down a lot in his book, The Man Not, where it's like, if you're not even necessarily considered a human, the very least legally, you can't, how can you then oppress that which you have no power over? So, I totally, completely agree. And I understand how that would, to look at everything under that one cultural lens framework is what you described, because essentially they're hating patriarchy is that the structure of patriarchy has been consistent across all cultures in America. And we know that's not true. We know
right.
White men and black men and Asian men, it's all been very distinctive. So I just think that would be a very, very limited worldview as you're studying. So, guys, if you're on here, hit that like button. Show support to the show. You can find me on Cash App or Venmo. As always, I will be sure to acknowledge all super chats. Also, I did see one actually through a few minutes ago. I want to read it because I think there was a question or a comment on there. Shout out to Dane C. Thank you, Dane C, for the support. Okay. I see Salute Shay and Kosher C. She wasn't playing. She a product on the black male misandry of the internet. A lot of these misandrists are college educated. Again, that makes sense. It would make sense because based upon what you just described a few minutes ago, that if you are essentially trained under that framework of patriarchy, but you're not, it's not really broken down or understood through the different cultural lenses, then you kind of have this assumption that, okay, well, all men just did this. And we know that's not true. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, Shay, it's clearly a thinking error. It's an ego defense mechanism, or more or less a thinking error called overgeneralization. Basically, overgeneralization says where you take the whole populace, and contextualize that populace and say, oh, that's overgeneralization. Generalization, Shay, would be on average, basically if it supersedes the median or the mean, then that's in general. That's why we would say in general. In general is normally over average or around the median, around 50%. If I say in general, black men love black women, that's about 50% or slightly over that. But if I say all black men love black women, then that's overgeneralization. And that's a thinking error. So what they tend to do, they tend to cast type or castigate all men under that, what I call spurious notion that black men are this or black men are that. But many times these black men are innocent bystanders that had nothing to do with it, because many people are lazy intellectuals. They don't think, how can I say critically, Shay? They think only based on their own anecdotal experience or their worldview, but they don't see the whole connotation outside of themselves. I try to train myself to see things outside of my anecdotal worldview and see the greater kaleidoscope for what it is. And if need, then I put myself in that, but I don't, make my own experience the law based on what people have dealt with.
Absolutely. Makes so much sense. Hey, Chantel, good to see you.
Shout out to Chantel. Shout out to her. Shout out to her.
Also, shout out to you, Culture Clinician, for the 10 for the 10 super chat. I am enjoying the conversation. Also, guys, be sure to check out his channel. Show him some support. Check out his lives. I think he actually has one happening later on today.
Yeah, we got one tonight called She Must Earn the Ring. We're going to talk about why modern women must earn the ring. Because I'm going to be in a movie with Al Grease called Frustrated 3. And, it's true to what Dr. Wim Glasser said based on choice theory and also a treatment intervention called reality therapy. Dr. Glasser talked about that there are 5 tenets based on his psychoanalytic process. And it's based on these 5 core components, Shay, or elements. It's based on power, fun, freedom, belonging, survival. Black men now, Shay, are going through what I call a catharsis, where men are coming together to share their stories and their pain. And because many people are not listening to it, those needs are being satiated as men are getting passports. They're beginning to travel abroad, and they're beginning to get their needs met with women that are soft, feminine, and also cooperative, and women that understand that the feminine actually is very powerful to helping men become the better versions of themselves. Women years ago knew that, but sadly, a lot of our current Western women, white and black, have been more or less deceived by caustic feminist policies, lack of self-awareness, and the presupposition that all black men or all white men are the boogeyman. And so because of that, men are saying, what the hell with it? We're going to do what's best for us. They said chucks and pearls. We're saying passports and pearls, meaning we're going to use our passports to get feminine women, and we're going to give them the pearls because they deem themselves to be worthy of that said pearl. So the show tonight is going to be called Why She Must Earn the Ring, because, getting married in modern times is not always advantageous for a man.
Yeah, no, it's rough out here. I mean, I had the interview with a panel of SOS Beamers last night, and I learned quite a bit. So, that's why I think it's so important as much as possible to try to not limit yourself to your own anecdotal experience and hear where other people are coming from, because it can be very easy to just pass judgment. And to be quite frank, I see this a lot on YouTube, where it's like, things always being sometimes so black or white, like it has to be all this or it has to be all that, and a lot of times there's not room for nuance. And it's like, actually most people exist in nuance. Most people live in the gray,
Right.
So it's like you have to be open-minded and willing to, at the very least, understand where another person is coming from. You can disagree,
right,
finding out the facts, but at least go through the process of trying to hear them at the very least understanding that, like, hey, they're humans too. They have their own experience too. They have their own vantage point too. And they're, they're worthy of being heard, if nothing else. So, yeah, good stuff. So, I mean, I know that was a rather long, I don't say a rather long apology, but there's a lot to unpack. But going back to her apology to Black men, I mean, were there any other things that you wanted to address, other things that you noticed, or other things that you think are worth calling out?
You're asking me the question?
Yeah, about going back to like the apology that she had. I know there's anything else that you wanted to highlight, because there's one more video that I wanted to show. But I think I saw somebody in the chat saying it makes sense now that she has rainbow on her page, and so here's
Right. Here's a great connection, Shay. There's a such thing called a conscious and an unconscious pathology. We are all a victim, Shay, of unconscious pathologies. We don't know about it. You know, as a therapist, we look at things through something called the Johari window. The Johari window, Shay, talks about the public self, the private self, the known self, and also the unknown self.
Yeah.
Many times in the clinical world, we call it shallow work. The shallow work more or less correlates to the dark parts of our consciousness that we're not aware of. And so sometimes that's the known self, the private self and the unknown self, or the unknown self, because people, they're not aware of those dark spots that are holding them renderless. And so that's why we got to have these conversations, because many times women like her are actually ruminating from unconscious pathologies. And what we tend to do, we tend to project those pathologies onto others, sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly. So that's why this whole new agenda that's more or less predicated under socialism or the socialist umbrella is very damaging to a lot of women and men, because it doesn't teach women how to garner power as it relates to being feminine, but it teaches women how to garner power based on masculine force. And see, when you have a masculine force coming together, then the masculine forces coming together becomes polar opposites of one another. The feminist, a woman is feminine is very powerful for a man. And once women understand that, we call it the amalgamation of femininity with the masculine, it becomes very powerful and very intoxicating. But sadly, many don't get it, Shay. Many won't get it. And I think a lot of it, Shay, is spiritual, and we'll talk about that at some point.
Now, okay, and I want to make sure that I understand a little bit more. So you were saying that, because I know this was in relates, I think, to the LGBTQ, as someone had mentioned. In the comments, and you're saying, is it under that paradigm, or you're just saying the current cultural paradigm in general, where there's more of a push for gender fluidity, and there's more of an expression of trying to redefine these genders? Or you're saying in that context, it's a lot easier for women to naturally go into more masculine roles? I just want to make sure I'm understanding your point about women being more masculine and what you think is really causing that.
So reframe your question, Shay. I want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. Say it one more time, please.
Well, no, you would mention that under this cultural framework, women are being are a lot more masculine, or are being pushed more into masculine.
Right. I understand what you're saying. So not necessarily a role; it's a thought process, Shay, when they're trying to vie for power. Listen, Frederick Douglass said it better than me. He said that power never conceded to anything without a struggle. It never have and it never will. So many times when it comes down to many of these modern women, they don't go into the relationships using their true power, which is their femininity, but they go into relationships using power as it relates to force many times, which is masculine. That's why a lot of women struggle with being career women and being feminine women, because they have to be in that masculine, because most male environments are very masculine. But many don't know how to turn it off, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Now I see what you're saying. So, and some of this goes back to perhaps just the competitive nature of society, right? Where it's like, when women enter the workforce, for all intents and purposes, they started competing with men, because only one person can have the role. So it's like, it's going to be you, a woman, or maybe another woman or another man. But nevertheless, there is a level of competition when essentially all roles are opened up for people to apply to. So you're saying under that context where, especially in certain spaces that tend to be a lot more aggressive, like corporate world, if you're in sales, different businesses where you have to be very driven, you have to be very aggressive to a certain extent,
right,
in order to reach your goals, that it pushes women in a certain mindset and a certain vantage point. But now when it comes to now relating with these same men romantically that they're actually competing with in school, in career, it can be very difficult for them to make that. Right.
So if you think about, Shay, now, where even in Hollywood now, everything is about competition with men. From She-Hulk to Thor, to the point now that a lot of movies that were once primarily men don't want to see it anymore, because it's like they're taking away the element that men like the most, which is masculinity. These shows are teaching women based on liberal dogma that they're equal to a man, as it relates to doing the same things. Men and women are equal as human beings, but we're not equal in role and design. We are equal as human beings, but not in role and design. There are some things, Shay, that you can do that you're superior to that I just can't do. But then there are some things that men can do that women can't do. I'm physically stronger than the average woman. Your husband, your father, I'm sure if you got brothers, they're physically stronger as well.
Yeah.
But women delude themselves, Shay, by trying to compare themselves to men based on masculine principles instead of comparing themselves to men based on feminine principles.
Absolutely.
And what it does, Shay, it leaves them in a paradox where they're fighting against their nature as women.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, this brings me to one of the issues that I've seen of late, where I constantly see women going viral or whatever of fighting with men, whether it's hitting men directly or getting in some form of a physical altercation or threatening to get in some form of physical altercation. And I'm thinking, who in their right mind would pick a fight with somebody who is physically stronger than them? But I think this goes back to some of that brainwashing where it's like, I am equivalent in every single area of my life to a man. It's like, you're just not. Like, you're just not. And that's okay. But I think it's quite dangerous when women take on that vantage point and find themselves challenging men in spaces where they literally are superior. So, okay. So if I think we've hit enough on that last video. If you're okay with it, I want to move on to the last.
Sure, let's do it, sis. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't had a chance to listen to this yet, but this was just sent to me today.
Okay.
From my understanding, I think she was actually fired. So, I think she has now done a third video, talking about what she's going to do now that she's fired. Let's see if I can pull it up. Yes, like I said, I haven't listened to it yet, but we'll see her thoughts on this whole thing, which should be interesting.
In 3 seconds, Janice will win a speedboat.
Bingo! I'm moving to the lake! Get us out of the house.
Ooh, that's a lot of work. Don't worry, skip the hassles and sell directly to Open Door.
Bingo.
When life's doors open, we'll handle the house.
Okay, so let me pull this up.
Well, hello. It's your friendly neighborhood therapist who thought she could save these hoes, but got her job terminated as a result. Story time? I think yes. Shit you not, I posted a video on Monday telling men that their dusty behavior is only harming them and that they would benefit from emotional intelligence. And I shit you not, by Friday, didn't have employment. All of this started with a Psychology Today article stating that men are lonelier than ever because they have no fucking emotional skills. And I agreed and doubled down and told y'all that y'all lives would radically improve if you expanded the shit that came out your mouth. But instead of healing, y'all will do anything but that. Instead of being accountable, like, hey, this bitch see me, and stirred a little bit, y'all got so hurt that you contacted MASA. That's exactly what happened. So first the post goes viral on Twitter. Because y'all need fucking help. And y'all wanted to argue with bitches blue till they fucking blue in the face. Some of you hoes is not going to be saved. And that's the conclusion that I've come to.
Right.
So because this shit's gone viral, I'm thinking, okay, cool. We starting a discussion on mental health. And people you might not like my fucking delivery, but motherfuckers is starting to talk, shaking the tables. I don't give a fuck. But then it turns into this entire crusade of attacking a Black woman who serves the fucking Black community. There were comments like, I'm going to find her credentials and report her because I told y'all to be better. Yeah, y'all are fucking weird. Y'all scream that y'all want to protect women, protect Black women specifically, but have done nothing to protect this Black woman who has been serving the communities. I have been violated in several areas, and I'm going to outline each one. This article was written by a fucking Black woman, putting my full government and my place of employment. So being doxxed by a Black woman can't fake, kind of fucking hurts. And she never once reached out to me or contacted me so I could spend my side of the story. This is the article that spooked my fucking job and got me fired. Not only does she not have any regard for my safety, many other articles have been written as a result. Here are a few of them, just to name a few. Black Twitter has words for therapists scolding men to go me fired. Not only does she not have any regard for my safety, many other articles have been written as a result. Here are a few of them, just to name a few. Black Twitter has words for therapists scolding men to go to fucking therapy. Y'all attacked me and got mad at me because I wanted better for y'all. That's the most crab in the barrel bucket type bullshit I've ever heard in my fucking life. A plethora of Black men decided to take it upon themselves to call my employment to get me fired. You succeeded, but you succeeded in not the way that you think. If it's one thing about Black women is that we're incredibly resilient. This just cleared the table to give me space and opportunity to educate the masses while shaking our asses to healing because y'all got mad because I wanted you to do better. I was told they consulted with shareholders and decided to terminate my contract because I told y'all to go to therapy. That's the world we live in. Cool. That spooked my fucking job and got me fired. Not only did she not have any regard for my safety, many
Okay. So that was her latest video.
Wow.
It sounds like she was let go.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts? Just thoughts.
Well. You know what, Shay? You know, and it goes back to what I said earlier because I do have a background in law enforcement. It said, what was her intent? There's definitely some drippings of misandry there because misandry is prejudicial association, and so it means to prejudge men. That's what that's part of being misandry. You prejudge a man based on your own perception. But here's the thing that was the death kill. When she said, "I tried to save you, bitches," that let me know. Yeah, that let me know, Shay, that she wasn't contrite, because if she was truly contrite, she would have left him alone and kept it moving. So that let me know that not one that she like social skills. She doesn't have soft skills. She doesn't have self-awareness, and she sounds very ignorant. You know, ignorant meaning she just don't know or understand how her behavior is not only impacting the profession, but also impacting herself. One of the key components of therapy is being empathetic, empathetic to the social justices or the issues that are confronting based on mankind. You know, therapy also is tied to what's called altruism. You know, understanding the human experience and showing love and empathy to those that are hurt or wounded or broken. Black men and Black women historically have been oppressed under extraneous norms, but the fact that she tended to minimize the struggles and the stories of Black men speaks more to her ignorance and also to her lack of awareness and understanding as a woman. So when she said what she said, it confirmed my point. That's why I said I had to look at it through pretext and context. So now looking at it from pretext, context, and post-text, it's fair to say that this woman not only has some underlying issues with misandry to some degree, because misandry is being prejudicial towards men. To prejudge can look like a myriad of things, but when she say, "I tried to save you, bitches," it let me know that, you know, she's full of shit. Excuse my language.
I mean, you know, not being a therapist, obviously, just listening to the tone to me from beginning to end, from her initial call out to Black men to try to get them to go to therapy, to her supposed apology, to even now, to me, just everything just sounded incredibly condescending. Just from
very condescending, right?
Yeah, because I'm like, if we switch genders, if she said the exact same thing but it was to women, we wouldn't be having this discussion. She would have been canceled way too long ago. So I'm like, just the overall tone. I'm not even a man, but just like the tone to me just sounded a bit like condescending. And then, you know, even from the whole, "I'm trying to save y'all," like, to me, that just seems a bit patronizing. It's like, do men need this idea of like, oh, we need Black women to go and save it? Like, I don't know. It just
right. But Shay, you made an excellent point. It's almost like how some white people patronize Black people. We need to go help the poor Black people because they're not smart enough to help themselves, and so it comes off as being condescending. It comes off as being somewhat elitist to some degree, and more or less juxtaposed that, you know, many times, like you see in the media in that shade, that men are dumb, bumbling idiots. We don't know any better. We don't know how to run the world. But these same women that talk trash towards men The microphones that they use to berate men created it. The domicile that they more or less give their diatribes, men created. The cell phones and the computers that they are operating on, men created it. So you hate the creator of the things that you benefit from, but yet you try to castigate men like they're bumbling idiots. And once again, that's all part of why men are frustrated, Shay, and why men are casting their bands asunder in a large portion, not all, but many are beginning to explore relationships. Listen, black men love, people don't believe it, contrary to popular belief. I've been married for 26 years. My wife is black. Not that it matters. But black men love black women. We just don't love the behaviors of many, sadly, in America. And as I said, there are a few good sisters, like yourself, Chantel Simone, Shalakimia Moffat, other few female content creators. But they're just tired of the behaviors and they want better. They want to be around women that are kinder, softer, and feminine. Women that understand their needs and willing to pour into them. Because see, if she pours into him as it relates to being feminine, he'll pour back into her as it relates to being a provider. And that's why we call it a symbiotic relationship. In a symbiosis, both benefit. He sheds his light onto her. She reflects who he is as a man, like the sun and the moon. The sun reflects onto the moon. The moon, shines onto the moon and gives light and life. And then the moon reflects back onto the sun. And so, but sadly, some don't get it, man. Women have more power than they realize, but sadly they don't exercise it because they have been taught to be saboteurs of their own ignorance, and it's really costing a lot of good women that are looking for good men. But sadly, many are checking out, Shay.
Yeah, honestly, if I could only imagine, like as a man, if your experience growing throughout this world, looking for a woman, looking for a wife, or whatever, if it is encountering someone who kind of carries that kind of energy, like I'm more emotionally intelligent than you, you need to come up to my level, you need to come up to me. Like if that's your experience, and it's like, of course, who would want to interact with that? You'd be crazy. You would be crazy and insane to purposefully connect yourself with a woman who has that mindset. That would be poison. So this is why I am not mad in the least for men who feel like they need to leave the West to find women who have just a completely different worldview that matches their masculine needs. So it's like I can't be mad at that. Shout out to Dane C with the 2 on the super chat. Okay, I see she wants to be an influencer. She does not care. It definitely seems like she doesn't care at all. Shout out to Fawcett Media with the 5. It says, great show, Shay. Kosher, do her statements reflect poorly on the profession, and can she lose her license?
That's a good question, Fawcett. I don't know if she's going to lose her license per se. She could get censored, or she might get suspended, maybe. And it does show bad on the profession because the profession is supposed to be about altruism and also understanding the human experience. But here's a caveat to that, Shay. Even though the code of ethics more or less posits understanding the whole human experience, to say the least, many times, many of those clinicians are also trained under that woke umbrella, that woke canopy. They tend not to be inclusive of all ideologies. Those ideologies, Shay, that sometimes are very traditional, but they tend to be only inclusive of ideologies that are more or less tied to liberalism or liberal dogmas. So the way it's written, it looks like it's inclusive of all men, like the Constitution. It looks like it's inclusive of all men. But the actual living mandate, based on how they show themselves, it doesn't appear to be inclusive of all other forms of thought, unless those thoughts are liberal thoughts. So she could get censored, perhaps. I don't think she'll lose her license, but it is a bad look on the profession.
She might get a few black female feminists who want to work with her. I can't imagine a ton of men will be lining up to be her client. That makes sense. Like going back to what you had mentioned, earlier in the show, where it's like if a lot of therapists if they're trained under a liberal thought, and it's interesting because liberal you would think would speak to openness and a willingness to look at different vantage points, but liberal thought is quite closed actually when you consider that it only will look at certain vantage point while excluding others. So It's not surprising in the least. I see. I tried to save you itches. You need to add that to your show. Great show today, Shay. Shout out to you, Glacier 61. Again, guys, if you hit that like button, show support to the show. You can find me on Cash App or Venmo today. Also, I'll be sure to acknowledge all super chats, and please be sure to check out the channel of our special guest, the Culture Clinician. It's been very good conversation having him weigh in on some of these viral clips from therapists to other therapists. So, guys, definitely be sure to check out his channel. He also does have a show happening later on today at 8 o'clock. What time zone is it again?
Yeah, so this is Eastern Standard Time, EST.
Okay, yeah. So be sure to check him out and show some support. So, after having gone over all of that, and like I said, this particular scenario is just one of a few. There was one that I think went viral maybe 2-3 months ago of another therapist who basically was just like, I have a hard time sympathizing, or I have a hard time looking at Black men through the lenses of empathy. This is a Black woman, and she actually went on yeah, and had an interview. I listened to the whole thing. So this is not. It's probably fair. It's probably fair to say that these women, although they're just particular examples, they are, to me, probably represent a stream of thought within, the profession of mental health. So, what does this mean for Black men who are interested in working on their mental health or improving it, or maybe even gaining better skills as how to navigate with different people and their family, with themselves? They desire that, but they feel like all the resources available to them would hurt them even more. I mean, what is the answer for Black men when it comes to that?
Excellent question, Shay. That's an excellent question. And, one of the things, we talked about why male empowerment is so important for the mental wellness of a man. Many times, Shay, many therapists come in with their own biases, sometimes their own traumas, and they project those biases and traumas to men. Now, watch this. Therapists in theory have the proper tools to treat all people. I'm going to say it again. In theory, they have the tools to treat all people. But however, there's a gender dynamic, and there also is an ethnocentric dynamic. Okay. Many times the gender dynamic, because they don't understand the thought process of men, even though they mean well, they don't often understand men and understand men's struggles. Many men, Shay, when they go to therapy, feel like they're already under attack before they get in. That's why many men don't go to therapy, because they feel like they're going to take the woman's side, especially in family therapy or couples therapy. Yeah. So a lot of times men say, I'm not going, because many times it's hard to find a logical or a woman that can take away her own biases and work with men based on the equity of the theoretical model, and also the application of the intervention. And so a lot of times guys say they don't see the benefit because they're always bad, Okay. And so sadly also, Shay, just because I'm a Black therapist doesn't mean that I can always 100% equate with all Black people, because like Tavis Smiley said, that my skin folk are not my kinfolk. Before we came to Africa, we looked like Africans, but we were not one in consciousness. And so just because you are Black, it doesn't mean that we think alike with ideologies. But for the most part, I think men tend to resonate with me as a licensed professional because my background is very eclectic, which basically means I have a background in law enforcement. I went to school, I got my first degree in law enforcement, went to school to be a cop, but I did do mental health social work. I was a mental health corrections officer. I got my second degree in generalist social work, then went back and got my license in special ed. So I got a background in criminology, education, and then I got my master's from UNC. So okay. I've done it all. I have a very broad background. One of the reasons when I got into grad school, they were so impressed because my background is very broad. But like I said, for the theoretical concept, most therapists can work with all, but many times many therapists can't relate to the struggles of Black men, and many times our women, when they come down to coming into therapy, sometimes they have their own biases towards men because they're ruminate through a concept called transference. Transference means when the client identifies with that therapist based on some trauma or pain that they went through. And therapists have to be careful too, Shay, because it's a concept called counter transference, where the therapist, if he's not careful, that woman that he's talking to could remind him of his mother or his girlfriend or his wife, and it can be good or bad. So that's why a lot of men don't see the benefits to going to therapy many times, because they feel like the therapists don't hear them, they judge them and blame them, to say the least.
No, that makes total sense. Who wants to sign up to go to a place where you're told that you're the problem all the time? But that's not to say that there aren't, things that men as a collective can work on no different than women. But if it's so one-sided, that's a bad deal. And I can even say, even in the context of a relationship, it's like even the black man and the black woman don't have the same experience.
We don't, right?
Look at the different men in my own life, my husband, my father, and just see the ways that they were treated versus the way that I was treated or my sisters were treated, and recognize that we even go throughout this world, even being perceived a little differently. So even if it's like within Black culture, if there's a different experience, how much more with somebody that you don't know,
right,
who has a different, coming from a different cultural lens, and how to create a space where there's empathy, a level of empathy and assumption of humanity for everybody. And somehow that doesn't seem to have been the message that has gone across for Black men as of late when it comes to therapy. So very, very good points. Shout out to Mr. Bobby Wright with the 5. I see Black men check out an app called Black Man Safe Haven. Also a YouTube channel called Express Your Black Man, ran by millennial Black men. Thank you, Mr. Bobby Wright. Also, thank you, Mr. Bobby Wright, for the 2 on the. Oop, where'd you go? Yeah, the 2 on the super chat. Looks like passport. Get your passport. So I do want to be mindful of time. This has been a really, really great discussion.
Sure.
Another show coming up soon, but are there any, other thoughts or recommendations or things that you would like to leave with the audience? Obviously, you yourself are a therapist, and I assume you have a lot of male and Black male clients. So anything you'd like to share with people who are listening?
Yeah. Well, listen, one of the reasons why I do my channel, The Kosher Clinician, is because me being the therapist, I took my pain and I used a healthy ego defense mechanism, Shay, called sublimation. Sublimation means to take something bad and turn it into something good. And what I want to convey to the men that are listening is that you don't have to let your prior experiences with life or relationships be the talking point for your future. You have the power to be the best version of yourself, but you can't be the best version of yourself until you modify those negative thoughts and those negative traumas that you've been through as a man. And so my channel, once again, takes clinical concepts tied into the human art or the experience. It takes clinical concepts and more or less coalesce it with human art and also trending topics to give a greater example of the struggles that men go through. Similar to what Christ did. Christ spoke in parables to convey the richness of heaven. So I try to use my channel to use clinical concepts to give human beings a better understanding of how that plays a role in the sociological formation of human beings. So so like I said, the show has been excellent. I really appreciate you having me coming on, Shay. I definitely want to bring you on my show at some point with Avery Woodley and maybe Chantel. We do a power forum, talking about relationships and the struggles of men and women, and what appears to be a faltering a Black community. Shay, let me ask you a question. When you look at the current community that we live in, what are your biggest fears about the community, and do you feel like it's done for? Because many say it's finished. What do you say, Shay?
Oh man, that's a very good question. I'm like, I feel like that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show, right?
The community by at large, actually, this goes back to a post that I shared earlier today about Black culture. Like, if Black culture, the Black community was thriving and healthy and well, I don't think there would be such a big movement or a vocal movement of men essentially leaving the community to find viable wives. And this really goes back to, what is culture? What is a community? Because you can't have a community really without a culture. That both are coincided. Right. And when you think about that, community culture, it includes, marriage. It includes, gender norm, includes having understanding of your history, of customs, of engineering, of thought, philosophy, all of those different things that really make up a culture. And I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of different cultures, people of different ethnic backgrounds, and I'll look sometimes at the way the Chinese community will interact with one another, or even the Mormon community. I had a lot of Mormon friends who would, before they went to school, they'd go to Mormon school for an hour or so.
Right.
Same with the Indian community. So it's like all these communities who live in America, not to say they don't have their own challenges of discrimination, but they live in America, yet they still have an ability to maintain very strong cultural norms and are intermarrying, or even if they are marrying out, they're still able to hold on to who they are and have a level of self-love. I don't see that so much in the Black community. I feel like there is you have everything from, pain between men and women. You have a lot of self-hatred that I see. You have, I think, quite frankly, a need for both men and women to maybe just want to jump ship and say, you know what, I'm done with it. I'm going to go just try to fit in where I can get in. And it's, to me, it just seems like a hodgepodge of a mess. So I can't say I have the answer at all. I certainly don't. Maybe in time more things will be revealed, but I think an aspect of my channel is recognizing that while there is a huge mess, I always believe that there is a remnant. I always believe that there are those who are out there, even if it's a small minority, who do want to do better and who do want to try to be a part of the solution. So I more want to be a space to do that, whether it is a minority or whether it's even for the next generation. So that's the way that I look at it. But I do understand and recognize that the issues in the community are so complex, and quite frankly, this is why I think it's so important to let men be men and women to be women, because a lot of the building, I think a lot of the rebuilding would truly require strong male leadership. But men and masculine men have to be first valued and respected in order for that to take place.
Oh yeah, I totally agree, and I want to applaud you for the yeoman's work that you are doing, Shay, as it relates to trying to get the conversation out. Many men are skeptical, Shay, about women coming into men's spaces because they don't know what their true intentions are. Many men are becoming frustrated, Shay, because they feel like some women are using these male spaces as a come up and a hustle. But I've studied you, and I believe that you are genuine. You're definitely genuine because you got a husband, I believe. Even though that lets me know that you're at least serious about family and community. But I just want to thank you again for the work that you've done and that you're trying to do. I always say that Virgo women and Capricorn women tend to be the most logical women. I don't know. You have a level of logic that supersedes most women that I deal with. And so I appreciate talking to you. I mean, it's like talking to a girly dude. I know you're a woman, but
that's hilarious. A girly dude. Well, I will say, my husband. One of the reasons I was attracted to him, he's the smartest person, one of the smartest people I've ever met.
Right.
At least to me. So I can't be a bumbling idiot, even if I wanted to, not around him. So
right.
Yeah, but it's funny that you say that, because I never got on YouTube. I've been in here I think about a year and a half now, and I never got on YouTube saying, oh, I want to get on those spaces. That was never kind of like, it's like, we just get on here and figure it out, and ended up connecting with multiple people. And that's a whole other conversation of like women being in male spaces. It's like, well, how do you define that? I don't think there's like a button you push that says, okay, now I'm in the male YouTube sphere, or now I'm in the female, So it's like, how do you even define being in a male space? So,
well, it's more or less that anytime you tend to do a percentage of your content about issues like maybe like say the Kevin Samuels or male talking points, then sometimes you can interject yourself not by default. Like I've been placed in the manosphere, even though I'm not a card carrying member of it, but sometimes your talking points will just put you in the conversation and say, okay, she's part of that space. So if the talking points are similar, then you will inject yourself by default. No more than if there were some talking points about women's spaces. By default, I would inject myself. I didn't do it directly, but by process of default, I inject myself. So that's why men say that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And I think part of that to me is just the very fact that there's a lot of things that I hear men complaining about that I quite frankly agree with.
Right.
Say that everything women, like I said, I truly understand both sides. I do, but I think there's just been, quite frankly, such an imbalance. So, and there also has been a huge silencing
Yes.
provide, understanding for a
Right.
very long time. So,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Shay. In the clinical world, we talk about something called antecedents, behavior, and consequences.
Okay.
And I think this conversation is definitely part of the antecedents, because the antecedents to male empowerment, Shay, is understanding men.
Okay.
When we don't understand men, Shay, those behaviors can be positive or negative.
Yeah.
When we don't understand men, Shay, and we don't try to understand men, then men will go into a silo. And I always say, Shay, that a hopeless man is a broken man, and a broken man is a dangerous man. The consequences, Shay, as relates to the ABCs of behavior can be consequences of epic proportion, which basically means that men will check out, men will no longer talk, they will become indifferent, they will become apathetic, and instead of having agents of community protection, because women need men to protect them, then men just check out, and so this so-called community become a vanishing point. And so this conversation is very important because many times men don't get their needs met. Many times many therapists don't understand the intricacies and the dynamics associated with being a man in this world. And many times, Shay, heteronormative masculinity is under attack. One of my one of my friends, Shay, said he said let your nuts hang, to say the least. And men want to feel like they can let they want to feel like, Shay, they can let the nuts hang, man. They're tired of their testicles being in their back. They shrinking up because they can't be men. Men want to feel like they can be a man and not be censored. Because when men can't say what they want, one of two things happen. They either check out or they become very dangerous. I'm going to say it again. They check out or they become very dangerous. That's why we talk about the ABCs to behaviors. Antecedents, Shay, behaviors, good or bad, and then consequences that can be good or bad. And so we need to hear and let men have the opportunity to flourish in their masculinity instead of more or less chiding everything and anything associated with masculinity, Shay, is being toxic. Because men got to feel like they're men. Yeah. And what women don't understand, Shay, is this, and your husband can attest to it. When you are genuinely feminine, when you're genuinely kind, when you're genuinely soft, when you genuinely try to take care of yourself, when you genuinely speak life into your man, that man will give you the world, Shay. He'll cast it before your feet. He'll be playing that song by Jaheim. You can have anything. He'll be playing that song by Jaheim. Everything you want, anything you want. And he'll give it to you because you now reflecting his mission. That's why women don't understand what submission means, because they don't understand male psychology. They always go back to a deficit mindset where they tend to more or less assume that submission means something bad. But it's not bad. Submission actually is duality. Men submit, but we submit in different ways. The woman submits to the authority of the man. The man submits to honor her, love her, and protect her and die for her. Submit just basically means, Shay, I agree, we agree. You take care of me, I take care of you. You take care of me, I take care of you. But when it comes down to submission as it relates to power, Shay, that's an age-old struggle. I know you're a woman of faith, and I heard you talking. You say a lot of good, powerful points about God and faith. But the Bible says succinctly that she will have a desire for her husband, and he will rule over her. So after the fall of man, there was a vie for power, or a jousting of power between men and women, where she wanted power. And so it's that's why it takes a spiritual woman to corral that sin nature. But many don't want to corral it. They don't want to corral it, won't corral it. And that's why we have these problems. That's why I say a lot of these issues that we're dealing with when we're looking for the four quadrants: bio, which is biology; psycho, which is the mind; social, which is the environment; and then it's the spiritual. And many times what's going on there, Shay, is a spiritual problem that many don't talk about or understand, because they have ears and they can't hear. They have eyes, but they can't see.
No, absolutely. No, I think, I mean, I talked about this before, where it's like, even when you think of 304s and women, 304s basically wanted to all of a sudden become housewives. And I'm like, unless there, from my vantage point, is a spiritual rejuvenation, like, and it's pure, like it's real, then it's like, there is this, that doesn't exist. At best, you are putting on a role for a certain amount of time, but eventually you're going to revert back to who you truly are. So that's why, no, I completely agree. A lot of these things, a lot of the issues, I think, especially as it relates to modern women, are just that a spiritual deficit that I think needs to be addressed. So
right.
Yeah, more to come on that. For sure. So, well, this has been, like I said, this has been really awesome. You know, thank you again for coming on here. Would love to collaborate with you or some other content creators on your platform.
No doubt.
Guys, be sure to check out his channel. He does have a live happening in just a few hours at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Right.
I think he mentioned, what is it? Well, she has to work for the ring, and I have it written down. Or something like that. So y'all check him out.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, y'all check him out. Right. Show support to the show. Also, if you're interested in learning more about mental health, or you want to work with somebody who might be able to understand your vantage point from a Black male point of view, from a straight heterosexual point of view, check them out. You might be able to find some solace and some good insight there. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, sweetie, I appreciate it. Many blessings to you and your husband. I really appreciate you inviting me on. I have a lot of respect for you. I love your work.
Thank you.
You know, you've been killing the game for a minute now, man. So I've been following you for a while, and I like your work, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come up here and chop it up with you. And keep doing what you're doing. Keep being the analytical Virgo that you are, and I appreciate it, dear. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for joining. This is so much fun.
All right. Thank you, dear.
On your next show.
All right. Thank you, sweetie. I appreciate it. Be good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Hit that like button.
That was fun.
Go ahead. Do it now before I reach out into that screen and twist your hand like Aunt Esther. Hit the like button. Thank you.
Destroy.
But it's mellow madness, because you will ask yourself the question, what were they thinking about, the angry man, when they did what they did? And then you got to ask the men, what are they thinking about, the angry man, when they allow the behaviors of some of these modern women?